What is up, beautiful people? I hope you guys are amazing. Welcome back. Light Warriors Unleashed podcast, episode 70. My name is Colleen Lindberg. If you guys are brand new to this podcast, I am the host and the channeler, let's call it, and the collaborator, because I love to bring people together. I love to bring in concepts that we can talk about. I love to bring in juicy or maybe savory, which is now going to be a new word in my palette after this interview, out into the world. And I'm just really grateful that you guys are here, that you're here to listen, that you're here to step into the space. And Melissa does such an amazing job on this podcast describing to you about what wholeness is, about what it is to be in oneness. What does that mean for us? And dismantling our traumas and, releasing control. We talk about surrendering over surviving and some powerful concepts in here, from parental ideas of how she actually parents her son, what she's moving through in her energetics as a leader, how she's showing up in her own self-expression and sexual expression, through her endeavors, and just a lot of juicy stuff. She has communities that she helps women literally embody their oneness and step into this space. Her social media, is really out there when it comes to self-expression and her ownership of this. And she's done the work, really, guys. She's done the work, and I'm just super grateful. Like, we are part of a book club together. We're part of the studio together. We've been in other programs together, and I'm just grateful that I get to connect in with her, to be in alignment with her, and that we get to serve you guys today in this podcast episode. So no further ado, here is Melissa in episode 70 of the Light Warriors Unleashed podcast. Oh my gosh. Okay. Melissa, I'm like so excited. And I say this all the time, but I actually really am. I'm like so excited to like hang with you for the next while to chat about all cool things, and I think this is just going to be amazing. So I just want to say welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
Hi, thank you so much, Colleen. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. Oh, this is going to be great. Everyone's going to get so much like bursts of energy from this podcast episode, because they're just going to be like, I don't know what those two are on, but like something about life is like jazzing those two up. I could just feel it because it's coming right out of you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So like I said before we hit record, I think I want to lead into like, you've grown so much over the last couple of years in like stepping fully in and embodying like who you really are. There's been a process I'm sure you've been through, and I'd love for you to just start wherever you feel called to, about leading us through that path, because the work you're doing now and serving a lot of femininity and moving through a lot of the dynamics of what you're moving through to serve like these beautiful women in the world was because of this transition that you've had in your own life, right? So we only authentically can go through stuff and teach through it, right? So go ahead. I pass the baton off to you. It's all yours. Lead us down a pathway where you want to go.
Of course. Thank you so much. So yeah, I love that beautiful introduction. Thank you. But where do I start? Actually, I don't even know.
In the middle.
Everywhere in the middle. I love that. I love that concept. I feel like a lot of who I have become has been, my vision of who I wanted to be and who I wanted to embody, but it's even many times it's even better than you could even imagine, right? That there's a lot of things that we say like, oh, we cannot wait for that to happen. Like, we are calling it in, right? Focusing on the kind of like the magnetism of, like that law of attraction, that, like universal, like pull that we have for the vision that we hold for ourselves. And for me, I feel like my life is even better than what I've envisioned, but it's also very different than what I've envisioned it to be. And I feel like that is what makes it really fun, makes it different, and also allows me to kind of still be surprised by life, kind of still be in the space of where you don't know where it's going. And kind of that's where I'm at. So a little bit of my background. So about a decade ago, like professionally, I was a fitness trainer. I was really into nutrition, and I still dabble into that for myself, but this was actually for others, like this is what I did in the world. This is what I love to do for others. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful time in my life. And that's what I did. And it actually came to be because of my story. And it came to be of one that was from pure survival, looking and wanting to find that piece of like happiness in her life, but not being able to know how to. And the only way that I was able to control anything that was going outside of my life, because my life at that time, was turmoil, was a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of things that were happening, that were occurring, that were never really in my control. Like from the age of 7 to about 13, there was so much turmoil that the only way that I knew how to be able to slightly get control again, or even just hold on to any of it, was through focusing on my body, and sadly, it was actually a space where it was very negative at first. It was very negative for many years, where I really just brought myself down. I brought my own, which I thought was like bringing my confidence up, was actually bringing my confidence down.
Yeah.
And it's something that you begin to learn, and you begin to kind of know what your intuition lies and what it tells you, but you don't want to listen to it because you think this is the right way, right? Like you think that this is the way for you to do it, for you to be focused on yourself, for you to bring more joy or more peace in your life, whatever you're calling in. So for me, that's how it felt. That's how it was. It was like me really focusing on my weight, and really focusing and controlling all of these aspects of the food that I was eating, the things I was doing in my life. And it, a lot of times it also felt like it was, I always call it like the mask that I wore in my life. Like I was wearing different masks in my life, and I was, you know in a very different way, I was trying to kind of give myself a little like love and a little pleasure, but in a way that I was still like within walls,
Right.
like I couldn't allow myself to fully be there, because what if the other shoe dropped, or what if it ended, or what if I got hurt, what if all these different things. And
Yeah.
of course, back then, I'm only a teenager. I did not know any of this. But throughout this whole process, I learned that this was not the correct way for me. And I was still a personal trainer. I did all of that through this time. I went to school for psychology, criminal justice, and through it all, I've continued to grow. And I just one day really decided what it looked like to choose me. And even though back then I didn't know that that's what I was doing,
Yeah.
I knew that I did want it to look different, and I still had a vision of what I wanted to feel. It wasn't more of like how I wanted to look anymore. For a long time, it was that I held on to this focus on how I wanted to look, right?
Right.
Like it was this focus on like looking a certain way, then I'm going to be more liked, or I'm going to be more, like more people are gonna like say more things to me, or I might be more enjoyable for others. Whatever it was, there
Yeah.
was always like, if I looked this way. But I began to kind of shift on how I looked, and more on the focus on how I felt, for myself first, and
Yes.
then focusing on the outside. And it took a while for that to shift. And of course, throughout the process, there was a lot of healing that went on. There was a lot of healing from my childhood that had to happen during that time. There
Yeah.
was a lot of healing with my body that also really, really needed that support,
Yeah.
especially because of the negativity that I put onto my body for so long, how I never felt that I was enough, or I was worthy, that I was whole, not knowing all these different pieces of me, but now also being able to feel like these are my truths. My truth is that I am enough. My truth is that I am whole, even though I went through so much and there was so much of my story that showed me that I wasn't. There's a reality of it that I chose that I am. So because of such,
Yeah.
um, this whole process, began to be not only for myself, and even for those that were in my space in fitness and nutrition, but then it began to be like something bigger. It began to be more more than what it was,
Right.
So a couple of years ago, I actually became pregnant. I had my son. He's healthy. We're healthy. And everything kind of changed there as well.
Mhm.
The way my body looked, the way I felt, it was like a complete rebirth. And it was also me kind of in a space where I wanted to kind of shift a little bit more of what I was doing and where I was going with my life.
Right.
And even going deeper into my own embodiment of who I was
Yeah.
and what I wanted to embrace for me. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And it always is about my leadership to myself, first and foremost, before anything in the world, because this is the only way that we can continue to be truthful to the world.
Right.
So that's what I that's
Yeah.
what I have been doing the last couple of years. And a lot of it has come from this space of worshiping myself, of deep devotion, deep,
Mm.
like deep adoration for who I am, and also who I have been in the past, and really seeing the light of all the shadows that I have walked with, and still be, in a place of peace with my shadows, in a place of looking at kind of on the outside, looking in, seeing where I could always be better for myself, not in the sense of like I'm not good enough, or I'm not the
Yeah.
best me type of thing, but
Yeah.
more in the space of like, I know that there's some growth here. There is something that I can learn. What is it? What can I decipher in it? There's a lot of moments that I'm thinking deep into this, right? So that's kind of where I have been going. So it started really from a space of wanting to kind of take my power back.
Yeah.
But it started really as out of a control space where I wanted to control something because I didn't have that power for so long.
Yeah.
And then it really truly began and became something of a deep power for myself, and a place of peace and healing, and I guess you could say reigning, right? Like as a reigning woman, and how that looked like for me,
Yeah.
and something that's deeply into my brand, which is like the one. It's like focusing truly on being the one in the world, and how that looked like for me, and how it could actually even not only change my life, but also how can I also support others to do the same in their life, and how can they embrace themselves whole. So it's kind of a beautiful story.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, there's so much in this, which is amazing. I'm like, okay, where do I want to go next? I'm like, because there's so much here. Because I really feel, and I'm going to go back to kind of near the beginning part, that a lot of us, especially as women, even coming out of relationships or, transitioning, we dive into something that we can control because some of us don't want to deal with the shitstorms that are actually in us, the inadequacies, the I don't feel loved, the I'm not enough, I'm not worthy energies. And especially coming out of relationships, not that you were, but I'm just speaking in this term that we go through this. So you leaned into fitness and we're like all in. I bet you probably had this like really juicy, tight body, and you were like this really like sexy vixen. And not that you're not now, you're just different in another way, right? That you're this like embodied full woman, whole in her vixen-ish than you were then, where it was like, look at my physical form, where now it's like, look at my wholeness and who I am in total. Right.
Mm.
I think this is a thing, like a lot of women out there are in a battle within themselves to have some kind of control in their life, whether it's in the way they eat, whether it's in the way they work out, whether it's in the way they parent, whether it's in their business structures. And a lot of that control is a cycle because of the fact that we have these traumas that we're not dealing with, which you openly said, like you had to do that work, like you had to go in and be like, okay, I'm looking at it. And now even in your practice, you're like, I see you. Okay, what are you here to teach me? Like, what are we moving through right now? And in real time, because we've done a lot of that work and I do the exact same type of work. Like literally the podcast that just launched today as a solo episode was me debriefing on my Guatemala experience that I had last weekend and about feeling alone. Like I was at the back of the line. Everyone was ahead of me. I was by myself pretty much at the back going through this energy of feeling alone. Right. And I'm like, and in real time, I'm like, okay, what is this here for? It has nothing to do with anyone else. Like, this is all about you, right? And I love that you brought that through, because I think this is an important piece. Because if you watch your transition, you went from like, I got control over this and this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. And look at me, look at me, look at me, because I'm worthy enough for you to look at me, to busting it open to do the shadow work, to then, you know, get pregnant, have a baby, completely potentially change in becoming in that area. So I just love for you to just speak on like, what really, like, if you're open to this as well, like what really kind of snapped for you? Like, how did you really shift that energy? Because there's a potent bridge that moved in your field that almost allowed you to see it, right? Like, because you were going on and doing your thing, and maybe you were like, oh, I feel a bit disconnected, but it never showed up as this shining bright light until one day it did. So I'd love to just hear if you're open to speaking to it, even high level, like, because I feel like there's a lot of people listening that are ready for that next phase, even though I don't think we're ever ready. And if we keep waiting to be ready, then we're never going to be ready. But I think that they're right there. And like, just to hear something from you to say, this is how I maneuver through, may help serve them. So I just really feel intuitively that there's something there for them.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there was a lot of kind of like a humming. I don't know. That's the first
Yeah.
thing that came
I
into my
say like
mind.
a
Was
whisper.
humming, like a
Yeah.
whisper.
Yeah.
And then it just it started like small. And then as time went by, it just got louder and louder and louder. And there was like no way you can just continue on with that loud sound next to you. You're like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, you're here. What are you telling me? What are you telling me right
Mm.
now? Like, what is going on? And a lot of it had to do with the friendships that I had. A lot of it had to do with the connections that I continue having in my life, and how that looked like for me, and how it actually wasn't serving me and how it was serving me. You know, like there were positives and there were negatives to it. And it also had to do with how I was treating myself. Like I started to really notice being like, wow, okay, the feeling that I feel with these connections is very close to the feeling that I am not enough, that I am not worthy, that it's actually not showing me my wholeness as myself. And I started to adequately be like, this is not the way that I want to continue living life. It really wasn't. I didn't want it anymore. I didn't love it. I wanted to be different. I knew there was something different. And for me, there was always like this thing where I just always know there, if I know something, I just cannot not know it. You know, it's like that moment when
Yeah.
you see something, when you know something, you cannot not unsee it, or you cannot not know it. It's just you
Yeah.
can't. It's like something, and again, it's like this little whisper, and then it becomes like a scream when you're like, okay, and it's like a halt. You're like, okay, I need to change something. Like, what is it? And sometimes we focus on the outside, right?
Yeah.
We focus on the things on the outside, which is the easiest to change, the physical appearance, the way you can control, like you said, you know, the way you can parent, or the way that you can count your calories, the way you eat your
Yeah.
food, like all of these different things are like here. But what if you can actually look within yourself
Mhm.
and really see what is occurring within you, you know? So that's where I really began to deeply practice, you know, the journaling, and just even just kind of free wording of it. Like just
Mm.
get pen to paper and just start writing all these different things and different messages that came in my mind. It wasn't like I was what we call like downloads, or it wasn't like I was actually, you know, transmitting
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
channeling anything. It was just my brain, like what is my brain saying right now, so I
Mm.
can just register it out, just get it out
Yeah.
because I just heard the screams over and over again. And then, you know, slowly but surely, I started to really notice like different signs.
Mm.
And I grew up in a Catholic household, so there wasn't a lot of talk of law of attraction or magnetism. Like my mom has always been very open to
Mhm.
it. She's one of the most open in our family. I mean, there are a couple others that have been more open throughout the years, but my mom was my first one that I really, you know, got kind of close to, that I really kind of understood a little bit of it with, you know, her and her incest, and it was like always like her rocks, and it was like, what are all these mean? And you know, the amethyst, and you know, this black, and like the quartz, like she'd always have all these different beautiful like things that as I grew up and I saw, but I never really understood them, but I knew that it was something that was different than, for example, just the religion part of it.
Right.
So I knew that possibly this could be something I can tap into a little bit more. So that's kind of where I started to focus a little bit more on my spiritual sense and my like sense of self.
Yeah.
And I began to really focus on me. And
Mm.
it was hard because you're like, I always have focused on me, right? This aspect of always focusing on me because of my physical sense. It
Yeah.
was like I always went to the gym. I always focus on my food. I always focus on this. Like, aren't I already focusing on myself?
Mm.
Yes, but it was a different sense of self. Now I was doing pretty much fitness for the mind and for the soul, which is very
Yeah.
different.
So good.
So you probably have heard that. You probably do it yourself too. You know, like this is how we got here. It's like this inner work is hard, it is physical, but the more that we get to dive into it, the more that we truly can see who we are, you know? So of course
Mhm.
it began with um how was it actually? Let me begin. If I go back, if I just close my eyes and I begin, I think it was like 2000, I think 2015, 16, 17, around that time. Like I know I graduated college by then. So I feel like it was around that time. So it was like 2017. But I remember, I don't even know how in the world it came to be, but I saw someone online, and then it just kind of just began to that. I listened to her on a podcast and I was like, I love how you speak. I love this. Like, what is this self-development? I want to know more of, which I already knew about self-development because I had been in the space of fitness and nutrition and all this. So I already was doing a part of self-development, but now we're talking about spiritual development. So I was like, okay, now let's focus on that. So I kind of opened myself to that. And from that space, you know, I began to focus on what was the femininity of it, what was the energetics behind things, and XYZ. And since then, I have been with different facilitators as well, and different, even like my best friend, she's been a huge facilitator for me. She is like a sex pleasure therapist
Yeah.
and she has been someone that has also really facilitated my own growth and my own way of healing through
Mhm.
different modalities. So it
Yeah.
just hasn't been one thing. You know, when people ask
Yeah.
you, like, what is that one thing? It was like I heard that scream, and then the signs began to show up. And then I just kind of led myself through the signs. And
Yeah.
when it didn't, and if it didn't feel good anymore, and if it didn't feel like that was the space for me anymore, I brought myself out, and then I knew something else was coming, and I
Mm.
knew something else was calling me, you know? So when we're so caught up sometimes on the how we're going to do it, it's like you kind of are not led and not being led. You're not allowing yourself to be led. And
Yeah.
I just decided that I wanted to be led. So it was like I saw the signs, I kind of just took on that. I was like, okay, let's do this. And of course, throughout the years. Like this is not something that just happened overnight.
Yeah.
And this was like, throughout the years, I was open to this. And then let's see how it all goes. And here we are today.
Yes. And I love this because I always talk about the intuitive flow, right? And our intuition. So when you speak of it now, it's like the signs started coming in and the whisper, you know, that screaming call eventually that it was that we couldn't ignore anymore. And our almost job, quote unquote, on earth is to surrender into that and to actually allow ourselves to go there. But our, just like you said, you know, like the control side to us wants to manage it. We want to know the how are we going to do this? What's the plan? And it's like, we don't have a plan, you know, and like we're limited by our own perceptions of life, right? We're in our box and we can only see in the box. And then maybe we'll go get a program or read a book that opens the box up a little bit more, but we're still in a box. So if we allow ourselves to be led by our intuition and our connection to divinity and, you know, God, universal source, whomever you speak to in the world, then the box dismantles because everything is available, and
Yeah.
our limitations are no longer there. And I love that you brought that forward, because it's such a powerful piece. And I think it was one of the hardest ones for me, like the surrendering and letting go part. And still to this day, I consciously think about it. Right. And I'm sure you're the same, because like we're conditioned as humans, in this environment to want to stay in control, when I'm just like, okay, I don't have any control. What do you want me to do today? Hey, can you just download it in and I'll just take action and then we'll keep moving, and it serves me a lot of the time. And sometimes it gets me into some situations. They're like, well, we needed you to learn this. And I was like, fuck,
Yeah.
thank you for that one. Right. So like, it's such a powerful, powerful tool though, when we lean into that and we kind of hold space that way. So
Yes, I understand that. I actually, something that came up for me like recently was like, there was a time in my life that I was surviving and now I'm surrendering. So what a difference of shifts, right? Where you're like, or like you got to think too, like survival over surrender. No.
yes,
Right. So it's like surrender over survival every day, any day. And
all
that's
day.
how it used to be for me, right? Where I feel like so many of us, I don't know, like life is so beautiful, but there are so many hardships that life can bring
Mhm.
that our nervous system is not up for it. Our
Right.
nervous system is like, "Well, what?" And a lot of it, we come now in the space of survival. We're in that
Mhm.
survival state. So for me, survival over surrendering was my motto for so many years, right? Like
Right.
that's what I did. It was survival, 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 survival. The way that I could survive was to control things. The way that I could survive was to kind of just allow anybody in my orbit, allow anybody in my space,
Mhm.
because they could possibly begin to love me, or I could be
Yeah.
liked, or I could be any of these other pieces that occurred to me when I was in childhood. It kind of brought I kind of brought that with me.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I kept hearing the screams of being like, no, enough of surviving, enough of just surviving. You got to now open yourself up to surrender.
Right.
And back then I didn't know that's what it was. And back then
Yeah.
I didn't know is that was the word for it. But that's what it was. It was like now it flipped the script and now it's surrendering over surviving. And that is what has been the most peaceful for me,
Mm.
and it wasn't it was like the screams were telling me to find the peace, but I couldn't know that that was what they were looking for. Like these
Mhm.
screams were telling me, like, Melissa, what you need is peace, and for you to be peace for yourself, like for your own support, and for you to also allow the universe to whatever it is going to do, and for
Mhm.
life to be lifing. You got to know how to actually take course, and that's for me was to learn to surrender. And I honestly don't know if I could have been or could be the mother that I am now today in this world, with everything going on. Everything, when I say this,
Yeah.
we all know what we all mean. It's
Yeah.
a lot that goes on to this world today. There's so much beauty, but there's also so much else that goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if I could have been a mother if I didn't allow myself to open to surrender
Yeah.
by then, and I see other mothers and I see where they are, and I still see where I'm like, wow, okay, I'm so grateful that I did what I did, because they
Yeah.
are even showing me that if I would be in that survival mode, how maybe my life would be. And I know they're doing their very, very best, but I
Yeah.
also see how right now in their life they're surviving over surrendering, and they're wanting to and desiring to have that peace. But it's hard. It's really, really
Yeah.
hard. But allowing yourself to open up, to embrace that peace, to embrace that surrender, to embrace yourself first and foremost,
Yes.
and choosing you is the most important thing of all.
Yeah. No, and I love that you brought this up. And I think this is probably one of the hardest things, in motherhood. I can't speak to motherhood itself because I don't have any kids. But I am too in the position of watching. And a lot of the time, and I think as human beings, we've been conditioned, like we can see it in our own mothers, we can see it in our grandmothers, we can see it in our friends, like the family lines and everything, and it gets passed down. So let's think about 150 years ago, how women were in a certain container. This is what you do. So that was passed along into a certain scope. So a lot of the moms today are playing out patterns from past energies that no longer are actually serving them. Like we're watching it happen, and you've embodied this, where it's like the feminine energy, like when we moved into the age of Aquarius, and it shifted from the masculine drive into the feminine flow. And not that both aren't needed, because they both are, but we're watching women come back into that wholeness of being able to hold, support, intuitively flow, own all the parts of who they are, show up in their, softness, as well as in their warrior energy. And both are imperative in the feminine form. And a lot of mothers, I feel right now, are out there, just like you said, surviving, and they've forgotten about these pieces, which I'm sure is part. And I don't think that you just target mothers, but you are targeting women as a wholeness to come back into who they are. But it's like, this is the thing that's showing up. This is like the reconnection back. And I always call it the remembering, because it's all in us. We just need to remember it all, right? It's all right here. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because a huge piece of me has been the remembrance. It's like remembering that I'm whole, remembering that I'm enough, remembering that I'm deserving. It wasn't that I was never it, right? That we are never it. It's just we forgot it. And that's very different than saying I'm not enough. It's very different than saying I am not worthy. The energy is very, very different, because when we shift the energy from I'm not to I forgot, it's like, whoa, right? Because it's like there is like something very different. It's a very different perspective. And that to me was very pivotal for my own remembrance of self, for my own remembrance of my truth. And it's something that I walk with every day, and seeing my wholeness. And the only way we can really truly see it is that we are whole, because it's who we are. Like that's who we are, and that's my truth. Now your truth could be different, the world's truth could be different, like the way others see us could be different, but what is your own truth? What is your own remembrance of self? What is your own embrace of you? Like how can you see you in the world, for you, like for who you are, like in the mirror, like what do you see of yourself? And that is a lot of what shifted for me, where it stopped being just the physical aspect of it, where it stopped being just the fitness aspect and the focus on the control in that area, but really just allowing myself to fully now be open to like looking inward and seeing what was actually calling me in, and what was actually drawing me in, and how can I open myself up more to everything inside within.
Right. And I think that there's like a little bit of a fear sometimes, when I look back, I started my entrepreneurship journey 14 years ago. And if I actually look back and be real and honest with myself, my main fear about being an entrepreneur was that it was going to work, not that I couldn't find clients, not that I couldn't deliver the content, or I couldn't step in, like that it actually was going to work. And if you think about that from that perspective of like, what if I am all of this? Like, what if I actually have all these possibilities, and then I never have to survive anymore, and I never have to like struggle, although we are in a human experience. So we go through our learnings. So it's not like we ever stop that, but it gets different where you're like, okay, now you drop in when you're fucking climbing a mountain, and you're like, why am I feeling alone in the middle of a fucking mountain? And why is this showing up for me? At the same time, I can move through it. And it's not like this big, heavy task that stays for years, that it's, floating around and stuff. Right. But it's like, what if it just could be easy? And I'm like, and I had to work through that, allowing myself to not have the struggle all the time and not be in the chaos, because it can be,
Yes.
like, go ahead.
What a different shift. What a different shift, because, there's a lot of us that have that aspect or focus on what if it doesn't work out. So for you to say, what if it does work out, and that bigness of it and what it actually means for you, if it did work out, how that would look like for you when others are in the concept of, again, this is like me doing this for XYZ reason, and also saying, what if it doesn't work out? And for me, I always saw myself too as an entrepreneur. I always saw myself as someone who desired love, adored, wanting to support others in the world. And that's what I've been doing since I was 14, 15 years old. I used to tutor kids. So that's kind of how it all began. And I loved it and I cherished it. And then from there, I became really into fitness, really into that. So I wanted to then support others for that. So I did that for a decade. And throughout this process, I really wanted to also help others in the psychology sense. So I did my psychology degree. So I have a lot of ways that you could say that I wanted to always support others, and it kind of became something that I wanted to do in an entrepreneurial way. So it became something that I wanted to try online, that I wanted to do, that I wanted to support, that I wanted to see what was out there, that it no longer was just the brick and mortar, which is so beautiful as well. There's nothing like one-on-one, like in-person action, yes, but also what if I could actually tap into someone's heart and someone's soul that is across the globe, like across the ocean? Like, isn't that amazing? And it has happened in so many different ways, and ways that I don't even sometimes even can grasp yet, right? And I'm in the space right now in my world where my business is a business that is being established still, and that I still feel like there is still so much growth. And I feel like for everyone, there's still so much growth in each of it. But for me, it's like a period as well that I still work full time. I actually do work full time, that I actually did want to have make it look a little different for me at this time with the life that I'm living in, and how I want it to look like, and how can I bring that in differently. And it kind of has been a big blessing, because it has allowed me to surrender more, and it has allowed me to not be so much in the state of control. Because again, there was something that I wanted to control for a little bit, which was my business, how my clients came in and all of that, which was another thing that went through my healing journey. So all of that kind of ties into it a little bit. But I also wanted to say that not everyone here just is doing this own entrepreneurship, or we all have our different ways of doing what we're doing, but it's who we are through it all that really, really makes a difference in our lifestyle and in who we are, and the embrace of it, right? Embracing kind of like this messiness. And I feel like it's like still a beautiful like space where I can say that, yeah, I'm doing it differently, but I also know that there is more coming. And I also know that, yes, I do want to write a book. I also know, yes, I want to travel and talk like to millions out there. Like, yes, I want to be in podcasts all the time. This is amazing, and being interviewed, so it doesn't even matter that I am not full time in my own business, but I also am still very much aligned to my business. So of course, all of these things are coming. So in a lot of ways, it really shows a lot of the work that I've done, because I wasn't open to having a full time previously. I wasn't open to having the schedule that I have now, but it's a very more kind of freedom type of schedule. And it kind of, I was blessed with this schedule. It kind of came into the world because, again, I believe in the attraction that I have created for myself, and the beliefs that I have really, really created the foundation on. So it came to be really beautiful, and it allows me to be a mom, and it allows me to be a daughter. It allows me to be a partner. It allows me to be the one who also comes in and gives support, and also like gives not only inspiration, but gives aspiration for others, and to also support them in their own journey, so they can really truly see that it's not just one way, that it has to be done one way, but it could be done in many different ways, your way, which is so different.
And it's such a powerful, powerful place to be. It's like I always speak to like each one of us has our own blueprint, right? We're all unique in our own energetic codes. We're all unique in our own pathways. We're all unique in our own missions. But a lot of us grew up in a pattern of someone else's blueprint, in someone else's belief systems, and someone else's talents sometimes too, right? Some people in life are like, I'll take that job because my dad had that job and my grandpa had that job and all these people had that job and I'm going to do it too. And we've forgotten that each person's uniqueness, vibration, calibration, frequency is what is actually necessary and needed on the earth right now. So the more we realign in that, the more we remember that, the more we fully embody it and step into it and hold the wholeness of it all. That's where the actual magic comes. That's where the impact is. That's where the deep rooted connections are. That's where, you get to walk through life with that peace, even through the shitstorms that you're going through, because you're like, I get it. I understand. I get why I'm here. I get why this is happening. Okay, I know what needs to shift and move. I'm willing to do the work, and it just changes everything. So I just love how you've brought that out in expression in all different ways today. So it's kind of really fun to watch it unfold as the podcast continues.
Yes, exactly. And for me, that was very important, right? To also
Mm.
even bring it out to the world, because there was like a shame that I held for a while when I was in my own space of kind of a closing, but then an opening at the same time of what I
Yep.
wanted to do in my life and how I wanted to look like. And it was more in the sense of, it was like, it wasn't like a rebirth, but it was like the next stage of like what
Mm.
was coming next and how that
Yeah.
looked like, and truly what actions that needed to be taken today in order for me to be where I desire to be, and also the lessons that I've learned through what I used to do. And now it's like, okay, I'm in this space of silence, or I'm in this space of surrendering and opening myself to, okay, this is what it is. And I also know that I'm very conscious and very connected with myself. So if I don't like something, if something doesn't feel good for me, I'm like, okay, I got to change it, or I got to shift it. Like, how can I shift it? Who am I being at this moment that I'm shifting it? And
Mm.
I can say it again in the sense of the focus on my position, with what I have currently, what I'm doing currently. It's something that is supporting me not only just right now, but it's also supporting what is coming in my life. And there was something within a couple years ago that I wasn't able to hold that for myself. Like, I wasn't able to hold having that financial stability,
Mm.
because a lot of it was with the focus on, again, kind of like takes focus on, again, on the control, on the survival, so it was a lot of the surviving state that I had, and how I wanted to be. And I decided that I no longer wanted that I wanted to truly create the foundation, so when I am again ready to take the leap and to fully be in my entrepreneurial stage, where I can fully give all my attention, whenever that looks like, whenever I feel that pull, like I know that that's available, and I still am already creating that foundation. It's not going to be from zero, it's going to be from here on up, right?
Right.
So for me, it has been very beautiful, and I also have witnessed many others doing it in very different senses. So
Ah.
it's been very beautiful to connect with others, to be able to also support
Mm.
others in very different modalities and different ways, where I can still tap into all of the magic of the world, of who I am and all of what I've learned, while still doing what I am doing full time, while also still doing what I'm doing and being very conscious, intentional with my son, which is something that has really shifted again, because I wanted to have that for him, and I wanted to really give that to him, because I was given that for 7 years of my life, and that's what I want to give. That's when I want to give back, but then I also want to give more, of course.
Right.
So it's in that space of want to do that. And it has been very beautiful to see again the surrendering of it.
Yeah.
So it no longer feels like I'm in the survival mode. And it was something that came up for me even yesterday or a couple of days ago, where I'm no longer looking at peace, because that's what I was really in the focus on previously. But I am the peace. I am
You are it.
here. That's who I am, and that's who I be. And that has shifted. And if I can truly bring that into the world, and I can actually even have it in an interview, if I can, someone can listen to it and be like, wow, like this is something that could change for me, and how I want it to my life to be, and how I want my life to feel like, or how I want to feel it within me, within my heart, for us to feel it within us, then I say yes, like this is so worth it every single step of the way, because we are it, we are worth it, we are the ones, we are who we are, and we are here to embrace our wholeness, and this is it.
Yes. And I love, well, and you mentioned it a few times, but like we have to lead ourselves first, right? And then we can purely lead others. Like there isn't anything I teach that I haven't integrated yet. Because if I did, then I would be out of energetic alignment, right? So you lead in the wholeness and in the oneness and in that energy, and you've learned, dismantled, activated, all the things over these last years. And we're still moving through, we're still learning. Like, I think that we know ourselves right now. And then it's like tomorrow, it's like, oh, I didn't know that piece was here, and it's like, we're in this discovery. And I really love, like, if we can move back into that curious energy. And I use this a lot with my one-to-one clients. I'm like, what if you could get curious about this? Like, let's go get curious. Let's go play in this field and just go see what's there. And like, I'm sure you're witnessing this with your son, and how he is showing you this part, and how it's allowed you to even start to play more in your feminine energy, in your embodiment, in your wholeness, because they teach us so much. I feel, like it's just such a cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he has been a big teacher.
Oh, I have no doubt.
He has been one of my biggest teachers. I mean, there's been many out there, but one that I get to see 24/7, that I get to witness 24/7, in my shadows, in my light, like all of
Yeah,
it. He has been
everything.
the biggest teacher in all of the ways. So for me, I've seen it all. I've gone through the space of really even you asking him like for forgiveness, asking him for like, I am sorry that I reacted this way, and this was actually a big learning point for me. And really teaching him during that time, like, hey, mama is also learning this. Hey, this is also something for you. Hey, how do you feel about this? And all of these different things that I didn't see when I was a kid. And the interesting part is that I had a beautiful childhood. And the interesting part is that I had a very, very nurturing childhood, but I don't ever remember anyone saying I'm sorry, or asking for forgiveness. So hopefully one day he'll say that. But to me, it's been very important in my own kind of learning and
Yeah.
healing for myself to really be open to all the ways. So when I need a space for myself to think, or I need space for me, and sometimes there is definitely no space needed or wanted when you were a kid, you're like, no, I want to be with you 24/7. Then it's really important for us to kind of really just be there in the presence. And I feel like that's another thing that he has taught me really importantly, like in a really big way, is presence is really truly everything.
Yes.
So I used to always like I used to just focus on today, but at the same time I used to fear tomorrow and what tomorrow brought, because of the uncertainty and the survival state that I was in, with so much of the trauma that I went through back to back for so many years of my adolescence. So it was always the fear of what will occur, the fear of what the other shoe to drop, all of these other pieces. But he has taught me so much about surrendering, and he has taught me so much through it all, and through all of the lessons that we have been through in this like last 4 years, that I can just be here right now and say, I don't know what's coming tomorrow. And even though it could be scary, even though it could be, you never know, but it could also be the best day ever. So what if I actually just open myself to just being here today, allowing myself to savor today, allow myself to savor who I am today, and who I am today, and embracing myself for who I am today, that I can just be open to what's coming tomorrow. And that has been a really big state, again, of surrendering in a different way.
Yeah, huge. I love the word savor. And I'm like, oh, I might have to integrate that. I say juicy all the time. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to savor something too.
Yes, savor. I love
I'm
that.
like, I can just like taste it on my palate. And I love words that like accentuate that type of feeling, right? Because if we can bring in those words, it creates an experience. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'd like to savor something, like I'm just like, oh my God, I love that. But the
Perfect.
potency of what you just spoke to, like, there's so much inside of that. And I talk a lot about being present because we tend to, just like you said, be worrying about tomorrow or be looking at the past, and we're missing the actual true connection within ourselves when we're not present. And then with obviously others in our life, and kids teach us that a lot. So do animals, actually. Like animals are
Words, yes.
beautiful teachers
Yes.
of
Yes.
this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. And while you were talking, it just reminded me of this like reel that I saw like a few weeks ago of this little kid that came back from school, and he was like, look, I'm stressed out right now. I've had a hard day. I just need everyone to leave me alone. And he's like 4 or 5 years old, right? And he's saying this to his parents, and he's like, I just need some space. And it's like, you're creating that for your son. You're creating an environment that he can come to you to be like, look, I just need some time, or I need this, or I'm sorry. And it's the modeling of all of that. Like, I'm sure my mom has a lot of apologies for me, but she's never said them. I'm kind of
Yeah, and a lot of
but
and
yeah, yeah. Go ahead. No,
I'm
go
sorry to
ahead.
cut you off. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that
No,
just
cut me off.
reminded me that just reminded me of a lot. So I've been reading, and I know you're part of the trust with
Yeah.
Carrie.
Yes.
So this is something that you're really into, but like the readings of the books and the POVs and
Mm.
everyone's kind of but aspect of how they're looking at things, and a lot of it really comes down to them not saying what is on their mind at that time, or
Right.
what's going on in their mind and how they're feeling. So for example, like you just spoke, like your mom possibly having all these apologies that she just never have spoken out loud, and it's just been
Yes.
kind of just filing cabinet, and
I
then it
know.
becomes like a really really overstuffed filing cabinet, and it's never something that has been spoken to. And of course I feel the same way, and I feel the same way that possibly I have had connections in my life that I also have not said sorry. It's that I've never asked for forgiveness or XYZ for certain things that I've done in my life. But what I have seen for me is that if I can have a conversation with a person and talk to them in a certain just being just soul to soul together, human to human, and really being open, and if there is a space for me to ask that forgiveness and to allow myself that, and for them to allow me to also have that, it's like really truly beautiful.
Yes.
So I feel like because I never saw it modeled, I wanted to instill that, and then
Mm.
I can also see it how it's very different, again breaking generational patterns of how
Mm.
things were because of the trauma that I went through in childhood. There was a lot of forgiven that I had to do for others
Yeah.
to myself. So like there was a way that I had to, it was like a letting go process, but because there was a lot of pain that came with that. There was a lot of pain that I went through for so many years, and I had to not, it wasn't cutting ties, but for me it was letting go, but it was like me forgiving them, but them forgiving me as well. And it was like a whole thing. So I could
Yeah.
heal through the process, through it all. And now it's again, we're breathing new life. We're breathing new life. So if we
Mhm.
can do that with the people closest to us, it doesn't have to be exactly our children, right? It doesn't have to be, if we are not a parent, you do have connections to the world, you do have connections with others. So model also that for yourself and how that looks like in your world, and that can create the space of, again, nurture, that can create the space of surrendering. You're surrendering when you are asking like, oh shit, I fucked up, in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. You are reading these POV books and they have these things and you're like, out loud, you're telling them, you're like, you got to say something. And it doesn't, it's like the end of the book. And you're like, of course, you're ever after, whatever it calls it. But you're like, say something now, because now you can
Yeah.
actually know what's going on. But of course, it makes the story better. It makes the story juicier.
Yeah, juicy.
But again, it really can model so much for you in that space, because you're actually, I feel like when you are asking in the, of course, in the space, in the right moment, and whatever moment you feel like there is that needed, asking for forgiveness, not even asking, but just being open to seeing another side, or even speaking out your mind and speaking out your feelings. You're kind of surrendering to someone. You're surrendering,
Yeah.
like, you don't know what the other person is thinking, what the other person is. It's like their mentality. Like, you don't know what's going on. You don't know their feelings. So you're pretty much in a surrender state, and you're like, I'm just gonna free fall, and I'm gonna be present here and see how it goes.
Yeah. And I just going to give a bridge here for those that don't know. We're in like a spicy romance book club together. So in case you're like, what are you guys talking about? That's what we're talking about. And the edge of that, you know, and like the things you can learn. And it's not just about reading about sex or bondage or like all the things, because each book is going to be different in their perspective. It's about how do we learn more about our limits, and how do we learn more about ourselves, and where are we limiting ourselves in certain dynamics of our life, and not just sexually. Like, it represents all different kinds of things. Like, you know, are we actually open to having a conversation about someone's desires and being available for that? And like, we could probably go down 500 million like pathways with this, because there's so much there to unpack. But I want to keep us kind of in the lane of what we've been talking about in oneness. And I feel like we've almost been talking an hour. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Like, just like, it's just so nuts. I know. And I want to hold space for timing and everything, but I would really love to find out from you, like, for somebody who's really they're getting it, like they're seeing it happen, like they're like stepping in, and then they're almost there, and they're like right, and they're like shit, like, you know, like they're right at the cusp of it all. Like, I'd love for you to just speak into them today, to be like, I don't know, there's something on in the heart that you're gonna move through, like in this conversation, in this moment, that I feel like someone's gonna grab and be like, that's what I needed to hear. Because I feel like we're all almost at this cusp of change, transition, or embodiment, or like you said, next levels almost. You know, it's like we're right there, and right there means something different for all of us in different avenues of our world. But what would you say to them? Like, what would you say? Like, they're almost at that point, whatever that is for them. And I just love to hear what's coming through your heart center in connection with that, because yeah.
The first word that came up for me was allow. And then the second
Mm.
word that came up for me was notice, because there is a lot of times where we are so caught up on the next evolution, on the next level, on the next destination, on the next goal, that we don't allow ourselves to truly like step in it.
Mm.
And not only that, but be present in the moment when it occurs, right? Because we're so caught up on what's happening next, and next, and we forget the now. So allow yourself to be in this present moment now, and notice the changes that are taking every single day. Notice what you're doing, who you're being every single day. Notice what is around you. Like, notice all these shifts, because I actually, and going back to a little bit of the book, I
Yeah.
actually was reading a book a couple of days ago, and it was around like her receiving 1 million like followers on Instagram, and for her this was like a cusp. It was like the cusp of like, I am going to receive like $1 million. Like, it has been on her mind for 3 years of really developing this blog, this fashion blog, and it's like something that has been like there, and she hasn't been able to achieve it. And finally she achieved it. And in that wording, it was like, I thought it was going to be better. Like, I really thought it was going to be better, because she had so much to look forward to for so long, and she didn't allow herself to be, and she didn't allow herself to stay in the present moment, and she didn't allow herself to embrace and savor each
Yeah.
moment,
So
that she was like, I thought this was going to be better. I thought I was going to feel better. I thought this was going to be a moment of celebration. And it was like, you know, and it becomes that way because we don't allow ourselves to notice and to savor each and every single moment we have. Now, I would be lying if I told you that I savor every single moment.
Of
I would be
course.
lying if I told you I am intentional 24/7. It's not like
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
I do take notice, and I do allow myself, and I do talk to myself intentionally, be like, this is a moment for me to just be here. And it's actually what has drawn me more into reading for myself, for my own expression, for my own, I guess you could call it evolution of self,
Hmm.
than, for example, tuning into like social media, tuning into Instagram reels. I have loved that so much for so many years, but now I wanted something different. And for me, it has been going back to reading, and going back to reading, especially these like dark romance novels and things that are like, yes, please, like, give me all of that. But things that also are very different from what I have been reading the last decade, which has been fitness books, nutrition books, and also self-development books, which I love. There's also a piece of that I have adored, that I have loved. But now I'm in that space where I can now also learn from something different, which I didn't know. I was like, I wasn't shut down to reading like dark romance or anything. I was more in the space of like, what will it provide for me, right? Like that aspect of like, how will this serve me type of thing,
Yeah.
when instead of focusing on like being open, just being open. Again,
Right.
the surrender piece of it, just surrender to like what is there, surrender to this. So I have been reading, and I haven't stopped in like 30 days. I read every single day. I read every single day.
I get obsessed sometimes, and I like to read a book in a day. Like I just,
Oh
but
yes.
I can read really fast, and especially these novels, like a lot of them have reoccurring themes, especially if you're reading the same author. And I realized the other day, so Be a Page, you said this is when before Carrie even had the group, and a while ago she mentioned it to me once in a DM. She's like, do you know Be a Page? I was like, no. And she's like, you need to go look at her. And I was like, okay. So I went and started reading, and I realized, because her last book came out like, I don't know, 3 days ago or something. And I like already read it. And I was like, all the characters in it. And I'm like, oh my God, I've read all the series of all these, I probably like 25 books. And I'm like, it's crazy that I've read all those books.
That
And then
is
I
so
remembered all the scenes, and I remember the characters. And then I was like, oh my God, this is intense. Like just remembering it all, and it's just like, anyways, this is like parts of me that I like appreciate. And I've been reading, I probably read thousands of these books over the years. Like I started with 50 Shades of Grey when it came out, and then it opened up this whole entire mechanism for me. And I used to own a lot of books too. And I don't obviously anymore, Kindle Unlimited, or I do it through iBooks or whatever it is. But like, there's some power. There's some power in this.
there is,
Yeah.
there is. And I want to say again, the modality that you use,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a certain way, right? We are speaking on how books have opened us in different ways. And it's very interesting that what we're speaking of is not necessarily self-development books, right?
Yeah.
Those that you are seeing in what we have talked about since the beginning, bring it back to the box, the way that it has to be in life, and the way that it has to be portrayed, or XYZ. It's really like, wow, this is the way that we have actually found it. And for me, I have found it through, again, reading different types of books, different books that I've ever read. Like, wow, that have opened me up in a very different way, in a very interesting way, I feel like, too. Like, I'm very open to it now, but I'm like, wow, it took me so long to get here. But it took me the time that it took me to get here, and it was aligned. It was aligned at that sense. But it's very interesting how it kind of came to be, because sometimes we don't allow ourselves or notice where we actually can open up to more of that, right? Where we can actually open up to more of that dynamic for us, and how that looks like, and how it can actually, shift and open up more of our expression of our own divinity, of our own remembrance, of our own like oneness, our selves, to just savor all of this. And it's hard sometimes, so it's allowing us to savor in the present and be in the present moment, to surrender all of that and how that looks like for you. So it's a little bit of everything that we kind of dove into today, but I hope that serves your community. It serves those that are listening as well, to really just allow yourself to open up more, to notice what's there, what's around them, and to truly go within, to listen to within more than anything in the world.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to kind of finish off. We're obviously going to have your contact details in the show notes. And if there's someone listening that's like, I'd really love to kind of explore what Melissa has going on, there'll be links there. They can contact you. They can reach out to you. She's got some really dynamic photos that she uses in social media and expression that she steps into. So I'm going to highly encourage you guys to go follow her, because like she's got something to say and some of you may need to hear it, you know? So like,
Thank you so much for saying that.
yeah. And is there anything else you'd like to leave anyone with? Like, is there anything else on your heart that you want to just close off with? Because I'd love to just make sure that we're complete in this experience together.
Gosh, I think we said so much through this process. I feel so complete already. This feels so good. Thank you so much.
I feel complete too. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we're at the end. Okay, this is awesome. And I love the flow of it all, right? Because it just, for me, it's all flow. Because I'm like, let's have an experience together, and then we record it and it goes out into the world and someone else can have an experience listening to us. So I love and appreciate our time together, and it's just so great. And thank you again for showing up in all of the ways that you showed up today, and all the purity of who you are in your wholeness. And yeah, I just thank you again, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. And guys, we'll see you all in the next episode. Right? Like, that was such a great episode. Obviously we could have went down numerous pathways. Once we started talking about like spicy romance novels, and I was like, oh man, we could go anywhere with this, but it is a reflection, a reflection on our ability to move through, our reflection on our ability to connect in deeper with ourselves, to actually step into this expression that is us. For so long, in my own world, I hid a lot of these dimensions to me, and I'm still working through layers of figuring out what this means and who I really am, and stepping into the space. And I know pieces of this right now, and I look forward to keep opening up more and more pieces to this and putting the whole puzzle together. And then one day I'll have it all, and then I'll probably pass away the next day or something and be like, wow, that one day of fully being embodied was amazing. But it's all in this pathway of expression. So like I said in the actual podcast, give Melissa a follow. Like I say all the time, help us share this out, send it to a friend, take us a photo of this and tag us on Instagram. Let us know you're listening. Help us get the word out in connection with this, because this podcast alone, in connection with oneness, in connection with stepping into the space, in connection with being whole in this avenue, is such a pivotal energy for every single light warrior, every single spiritual person, every single human on earth. And the more we lean into this, and the more we accept this, and the more we are it, the more change happens and the more impact happens. So I'm going to leave you with that today. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being all in. And I will see you guys soon. Have a great day.